We are in a disinformation and a mis and malinformation epidemic. I testified about it in my last visit before the committee. And I do have to point out one piece of incorrect information that we heard today, that this theory of the case was never put before Donald Trump until the closing of the jury. I have here, not only do we have the response to Bill of Particulars, I have the opposition to the motion to dismiss November 9th, 2023, putting forth, may I have the middle Russian doll, please?
This one?
Here it is. Look at the document. The Russian doll is in the document.
Not true.
Here it is, page 25, please. These actions violated Elections Law 17-152, conspired to promote the election of a person to public office by unlawful means, including FICA, the falsifying the records of other New York enterprises, and mischaracterizing the nature of the repayment for tax purposes.
Introduce documents into the record.
May I?
But I
didn't ask to introduce it.
The gentlelady.
May I return the Russian doll?
The people of the state of Missouri watched in horror as the left's direct assault on President Trump manifested itself in the form of a corrupt prosecution of the president, which resulted in an errant criminal conviction. We are a nation of laws that are supposed to be equally applied. Instead, the left has prioritized its hatred of President Trump above the rule of law. To put it plainly, the left hates President Trump more than they love this country. The credibility of our criminal justice system has been undermined and hangs in the balance. If we are to protect the rule of law, we must end the lawfare against President Trump. As a nation, we must affirmatively reject Soros-backed prosecutors who refuse to enforce the law and instead weaponize the criminal justice system to achieve political ends. As a nation, we must eliminate the Vera Institute's influence over the DOJ and our local prosecutors' offices.
I'm going to focus my remarks on due process as a constitutional lawyer and someone who practices in the field. Most of you went to law school, so you remember that due process is part of the Constitution that ensures that the processes employed to deprive someone of life, liberty, or property are fundamentally fair. And of course, we all learned that there are twin pillars of due process. One is notice, and in the criminal context, that means notice of the specific charge that you face, as well as the issues that are raised therein, in other words, the elements of that crime. And number two, a meaningful opportunity to be heard on those charges. And unfortunately, Mr. Trump's New York trial violated both of these twin pillars of due process. And to explain why, first of all, I've attached a flow chart to my written statement that might be helpful as I go along through my oral testimony. But I thought I'd also bring another visual of the Russian nesting dolls to give you some sense of the complexity of the theory of criminality with which Mr. Trump was faced in New York. This first doll represents the actual charges in the indictment against Mr. Trump. There were 34 charges of felony falsification of business records under New York law. And to make it a felony falsification, you have to meet all of the elements of misdemeanor falsification, which means you have to have a falsified business record with an intent to defraud. And then to make it a felony, you have an additional element that must be proven. That additional element is the intent to commit another crime. All right, so the next nesting doll is, what is that other crime that Mr. Trump intended to commit?
Thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate you inviting me back today for this hearing. You may notice that I'm not turning my microphone on and off. Today is the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, and we do not operate electronics on our holidays. I didn't think I would be able to come at all, but my rabbi gave me permission when I explained the significance of today's hearing. I was in court throughout the 6-week plus Manhattan criminal trial of former President Donald Trump for interfering in the 2016 election and covering it up. I want to make 3 points today. First, a jury of Mr. Trump's peers in the city where he lived and worked most of his life found him guilty. I spent most of the trial watching them, and unlike some in court who dozed, they paid extremely close attention throughout. The jurors got it right. Witness after witness formerly inside Mr. Trump's orbit, supported both parts of the jury's conclusion. First, that Mr. Trump intended to influence the 2016 election by unlawful means, including in the form of a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels to benefit his campaign, over $127,000 in excess of the legal limits. Second, that Mr. Trump covered it up through 34 false business records that disguised the repayment of that excessive contribution as a legal expense. The jury were not the only ones who got it right. So did the judge. I know this may astonish some who were fed a steady diet of disinformation about him, but Justice Juan Merchan bent over backwards to be fair to the defendant. Why should Mr. Trump have been allowed, for example, to act in contempt of court by violating the gag order no less than 10 times before he was warned that the 11th violation would lead to more serious consequences? Justice Merchan was judicious on that and many other occasions, as I believe the appellate review will demonstrate. Second, the jury found Mr. Trump lied to voters and covered it up with phony documents. Does that sound familiar? It should, because we saw this pattern repeat in 2020 with the big lie that Mr. Trump won the election. The false documents in 2020 were fake electoral certificates that were part of a scheme to overturn the legitimate outcome of the election in this body, with tragic results on January 6, 2021. And Mr. Trump is limbering up to try the big lie again. He will not commit to accepting the 2024 election results unless he wins. That brings me to my third and final point, where the real threat of the politicization of the justice system and the weaponization of government lies. The attacks on the trial and verdict by the former president and others are politicizing a crime, falsification of business records, that has been prosecuted about 10,000 times in New York since 2015. Mr. Trump should not be treated any differently, no better, no worse, than those other defendants who falsified documents. His politicization of the case has led to a staggering amount of confusion, such as that there was no underlying crime specified that made his document falsification a felony. Not so. I brought an exhibit also, the May 12, 2023 Bill of Particulars. That's the response to the Bill of Particulars that did specify the crime. And I have a pile of other documents here showing that that happened over and over again. As bad as all that is, the worst politicization is the call by Mr. Trump and others to baselessly prosecute his adversaries in retaliation for the verdict. Just last week, Mr. Trump pointed to his own prosecution and then said, it's very possible it's going to have to happen to them, to his political opponents. Those words are all the more chilling because they are not isolated to the issue of this trial. We should take them as a warning of what is to come should he return to office, starting with his promise to be a dictator on day one. That would be the real weaponization of government, not Mr. Trump's being held accountable by 12 of his fellow citizens. Thank you.
Is the Biden campaign guilty of interference in the 2020 election?
No.
Did President Biden say repeatedly, and did the Biden administration repeatedly declare the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation?
I am not an authority on the statements or on the laptop.
I mean,
Mr.
come
Roy.
on. Was that not repeatedly stated by the President of the United States and the President's campaign? For example, did President Biden not say in a debate, look, there are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan They have said this has all the characteristics. 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, said what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except him and his good friend Rudy Giuliani, and they go through and talk about it. Was that not a central feature of the campaign in 2020 by President Biden?
I do think it's very important to distinguish between the vigorous debate that we've seen here today, extremely vigorous, and a violation of
Was Hunter Biden
violation of
convicted?
election
Was
law.
Was Hunter Biden convicted this week based on evidence obtained in that laptop?
In part, yes.
Yes. Hunter Biden was convicted this week in information that was brought out from that laptop, which President Biden and his campaign repeatedly referred to as disinformation in the 2020 campaign. So the former president is or is not guilty, or is not, engaged in activity that could be described as election interference.
There's a difference between falsifying documents to cover up and
Okay, well, let's talk
scheme
about
to
that.
interfere with an election by, if I may finish my sentence.
No, it's just my time.
There is
Let
a
me
difference
let me ask
between
you this.
breaking the law and political debate.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. What is the first date of a crime that is alleged to have been committed by President Trump? The actual date of the crime.
The date of the initial crimes were when the conspiracy to interfere with the 2016 election was formed in August 2015 at Trump Tower, when David Pecker, an independent witness, testified that he, Mr. Cohen, and Mr. Trump agreed on a conspiracy to violate New York law.
Was it not the crime that Alvin Bragg alleged first committed was on February 14th, 2017?
That is
The actual crime?
That is when the cover-up occurred. That is a different element of the crime. The conspiracy began August 2015.
The fact of the matter is, and for what? Are NDAs illegal?
When an NDA is used to facilitate an illegal campaign contribution, over $127,000 in excess of the legal limits, yes.
Well,
it is a means. It is an unlawful means.
As the gentleman from Kentucky just pointed out, the absurdity of that assertion is plain based on what he was just making in his case.
Mr. Eisen, I just want to make sure you answered the ranking member, I think, and I want to make sure I heard it correctly, that you said President Trump's interference in the 2016 election.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
That he interfered in the 2016 election?
Yes, sir.
And real quickly, how so?
The jury unanimously found in the Manhattan case that former President Trump had committed 34 felony violations of document falsification.
You weren't referring to anything else?
No, that's not true. That's disinformation, sir.
Yeah, okay.
In order to find that, they were charged with election interference. The underlying crime that made that a felony, not a misdemeanor, was election interference. Same pattern as 2020.
So it's all about election interference in 2016 also?
So, Ambassador Eisen, I'd like to ask you, why is it important for democracy that presidents or presidential candidates, no matter what party they come from, be accountable for their crimes and not be held to be above the law?
Ms. Ross, it's the fundamental American idea. We were speaking earlier of the proud history of our country with all our challenges over the centuries. We overthrew a system and a king, George III, where one man was above the law. In his place, we put the Constitution and the founding American principle. No one is above the law. If Donald Trump, as the jury unanimously found of 12 of his peers, covered up 2016 conduct of a pattern that we saw again in 2020, we see him limbering up for in 2024, then he deserves to be found guilty. If 10,000 other cases, approximately, in New York since 2015 have resulted in prosecutions. He should not be held to a different standard when he falsifies business records to cover up another crime. That's what America is. That is why this verdict was so important.
And again, Ambassador Eisen, do you think that the Obama administration was correct in not interfering in the John Edwards prosecution?
I do. You correctly point out that case relied on the testimony of a former campaign aide, Mr. Young, and his wife, Sherry, weak witnesses, contrary to what we saw in New York, witness after witness, document after document, an overwhelming factual and legal case that will withstand appellate review.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Eisen, what you've just stated is so utterly and completely absurd, it's almost impossible to even respond to it. This case will be reversed on appeal. The level of egregious reversible error that was demonstrated by this judge and by the prosecutors is absolutely off the charts. I've never in my entire career seen anything even close to it. I think you recognize that. I think the vast majority of the American people recognize that. I really want to focus on the equal protection and due process issues that are so clearly evident here. And the fact, Mr. Eisen, that you keep going back to 2016 and what occurred in 2016 is extremely important from that standpoint.
Just talking about 2016, I think, Ambassador, you made statements about interference in election. What do you think, from your perspective, to have Department of Justice under President Obama at that time, and you're probably very familiar with Durham report, rushing through closing the case for Hillary Clinton without doing any proper investigation, and then rushing through to have Russian collusion hoax against Trump without even vetting any of the information, and it turned out to be all lies, right? We have a report on that. So do you think, from your perspective, and then colluding to cover up with Ms. Media's, like Politico and other one, to cover up the story, isn't it seem like that could be looking like interference in election in 16?
No, Ms. Spartz, I don't believe that. There was ample evidence to predicate that investigation, including the polling data that was passed from Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort to Konstantin Kilimnik.
No, I'm talking about the report. So you think the special prosecutor did not do a good job and he lied in the report? I mean, he actually concluded in his report that FBI didn't do its job, and it was outrageous. He was outraged what's happened in FBI.
He did
Well, it seems strange, but let's go further. The same situation with Hunter Biden in 2020. The same media, political reporters, have the story that, that actually was 50 security, this national security firm advisors, a printed story that Hunter Biden laptop doesn't exist, and give legs to that story, and all media go that, and he's talking a debate. And this is all former, Department of Justice, employees. And then it's going to, in the election, President, Biden as a candidate at the time using it, to cover up and say, oh, it doesn't exist. We know it exists. Doesn't it look strange to you?
The Biden Department of Justice empowered a Trump holdover U.S. Attorney, David Weiss, to prosecute Hunter using the laptop. It's the exact opposite. It's an affirmation of the way the rule of law works.
In 2020, doesn't it look strange that that's a period of election and they have disinformation campaign? The same political reporters are doing again. Doesn't it seem like awfully strange to you? Doesn't it seem like, and it's not interference at all. But I'm not going to probably get an answer because you do have a double standard, and we do have a double standard, and our system of justice is broken.
If you'll permit me, I'm going back to my old professor days, not that I did this. A little pop quiz. Help me correct the record if you don't mind. Here we go. And it is about the claims around our institutions. Number one, Donald Trump, referring to the 2016 presidential election, claimed, quote, "I won the popular vote if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally," end quote. Mr. Eisen, Ambassador Eisen, was that statement that millions of people voted illegally in the 2016 presidential election true or false?
like 30,000, over 30,000 other statements that the former president has made false.
Thank you. Donald Trump in 2019, referring to the free press, claimed, quote, truly they are the enemy of the people. Ambassador Eisen, is the press the enemy of the people, true or false?
Under the First Amendment of the Constitution and the proudest traditions, the Fourth Estate is the pillar of American people, the friend of the American experiment. False.
In November and December of 2020, Mr. Trump claimed, I won this election by a lot, all caps, and this fake election can no longer stand. Ambassador Eisen, did Trump win the 2020 election?
He lost fair and square, and the big lie that he won is one of the most heinous and dangerous falsehoods in our history as a nation.
That's actually at the crux of this. I was going to make that extra credit. Was it a fake election? But without being flip, you said it much more eloquently. Number 5, Marjorie Taylor Greene, referring to the search at Mar-a-Lago, claimed the Biden DOJ and FBI were planning to assassinate Pres Trump and gave the green light. True or false, Ambassador?
False. It is they were referring to a standard term of search warrants that you can also find in the search of President Biden's premises.
Strange. Thank you for that clarity. Number 6, Chairman Jordan claimed District Attorney Alvin Bragg's criminal case against Donald Trump was a politically motivated prosecution. Ambassador Eisen, true or false?
It was, as we say in the legal profession, a righteous case, and the appeals will prove that. And I have the receipts here with me to prove it.
Number 7, Mr. Gates claimed Attorney General Garland dispatched Matthew Colangelo to prosecute Mr. Trump. Ambassador Eisen, is that true?
The AG this week issued a letter, it's now in the record, definitively debunking that conspiracy theory. It's outlandish and false.
And in the time I have remaining, I'd like to ask you, something I've been fighting here on this committee, what now feels like the entire 5.5 years I've been on this committee, is the disinformation in service to one who is now a convicted felon. It is so dangerous, and yet we hear from the other side of the aisle tearing down a faith in our institutions, whether it's our electoral system, the Department of Justice, the FBI. Some on this committee would like to defund FBI and ATF. And they decry the fact that Americans' faith in our institutions is at the lowest low, as they make sure that is the reality. What comments do you have about the danger of the disinformation and misinformation now?
We are in a disinformation and a mis and malinformation epidemic. I testified about it in my last visit before the committee, and I do have to point out one piece of incorrect information that we heard today, that this theory of the case was never put before Donald Trump until the closing of the jury. I have here, not only do we have the response to Bill of Particulars, I have the opposition to the motion to dismiss November 9th, 2023, putting forth, may I have the middle Russian doll, please?
This one?
Here it is. Look at the document. The Russian doll is in the document.
Not true.
Here it is, page 25, please. These actions violated Elections Law 17-152, conspired to promote the election of a person to public office by unlawful means, including FICA, the falsifying the records of other New York enterprises, and mischaracterizing the nature of the repayment
Witness
for
cannot
tax purposes.
introduce documents into the record.
May I?
But I would,
I didn't
I'm
ask
sorry.
to introduce it.
The gentlelady's
May I
time is
return the Russian doll?